Shavuot Tov to everyone. In this week's portion, Metzorah, which is usually connected to Tazriah, but this because it's a leap year, and this year they're both separated. Then also last week's Parsha Tazriah, and also this week specifically is called Metzorah. It's all discussing Tumat Tzarat, a very unique semi-spiritual disease that was widely spread in the biblical times, where, as our sages teach us, as a result of talking lashon hara, or bad speech, talking in a foul manner, a way that a person shouldn't speak. So there used to be all sorts of boils on one's skin, which would also unpleasantness, and also it would render him secluded from the camp. So he'd have to stay outside the camp for a certain amount of time. Again, as all the details of the halachot and all of the way you need to behave with this person is described at length in this parasha. Now, this whole concept of tzarat, which again is a disease that we don't have today because it manifests like a direct, clear spiritual manifestation, like a lot of things that aren't, all the miracles that aren't direct today, and we need to contemplate on their more acute, or we need to be more sensitive to their deeper meanings and how they manifest today in our lives. So this concept of tzarat is strongly, like we said, strongly connected to speech, to how a person expresses oneself and what a person speaks about, how a person should be speaking. So this week in Me'ach Shiloach, he discusses that. He brings a verse from Yirmiyahu. So the verse in Yirmiyahu says that Im totzi kar mizolel kefi tihiyeh. So I'll transliterate that. But it says that if you manage to take the value out of the general mess, then you will be as my mouth. Like you will become my own mouth. So the prophet is saying this to the people in the name of Hashem, that any person who manages to take like the diamond out of the rough, take that the needle in the haystack of value out of any messy situation, then that person who can take out the point of value for every situation, he's the one who can express Hashem. He can be HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mouth. So he uses the Me'ach Shiloach, brings this verse to discuss the entire concept of speech. So we titled this class Free Speech because that's such a catchy title today. So it's not, we didn't just pun off, but it actually expresses something. Why is this topic of free speech so valuable, so cherished in today's culture? So simply, it's not just speech. I mean, we live in a culture that kind of sanctifies every expression of self. So everybody is also very involved inevitably in expressing themselves. You could say that it's a result of all sorts of socioeconomic changes that we've gone through over the past couple of hundred of years. Probably foremost the fact that we all have time and an abundance of just leisure because we're not busy surviving on a daily basis, that we're more prone, we're available to contemplate on who we are and what's going on with us, what do we have to say. But every person, this is expressing and revealing a very natural phenomenon, that every person, at least when he's available to it, that he finds himself with a dire will, like a lust burning within him to express something. Now, in the Torah, in the Jewish thought, so the word describing a person, like if you want to differentiate the human race from all the other races of animals on the planet. Not just animals, there's also inanimate creatures, and there's stones and rocks and birds and fish and plants, there's vegetation, there's all sorts of layers in creation. And again, you can also contemplate where it can make the differentiations. But if you want to differentiate the human being, the human race, from the animal races, so there could be all sorts of traits. Maybe the most prominent one maybe is consciousness, awareness, self-awareness, or faith, or intellect, or much more intellectual than other races, other animals in the creation. So if you ask a person what's the most prominent trait of the human race, then you'd probably get all sorts of answers. But in the Torah, like in the simple wording, the semantics of the Torah, so what differentiates the uniqueness that we're titled after, what we're named after, is our ability to speak. Medaber, the speaking species. So that is the most intrinsic definition of what a human being is one who speaks. And that's somewhat surprising. It wouldn't be the first thing to come to mind of our uniqueness and what differs us from the vegetation or from animals or from inanimate creatures. We wouldn't necessarily intuitively think about speaking, but in the Torah, this is really the most important, the most prominent intrinsic trait of what a human being is. Now, you can take speech not as more of a prototype. What a human being is the ability or the aspiration to express oneself. That a person has a self and he aspires to express his self. That's what again consciously a conscious aspiration to express myself is what it means to speak. Now, really, the archetype or the simplest method of expression is really literate speech. Now, also within like a like on a biological perspective or a Darwinian evolutionary perspective. So really, this is like a leap of differentiation that we're not really clear on where human speech became different from all of other interaction. But it's very clearly, infinitely, vastly more intricate. Also, the communication method, but in a sense, speech isn't just a communication method, as we're trying to stress right now. It's actually a method of expression of self. So under that category of speech, you can actually throw in all of art and all of a person's innate tendency to want to say something, to make a statement. So there's something existential in our existence that we want to say something, or even more than we want to say something, we're saying something. Every person has a sensation that his existence means something, expresses something. And because our existence is expressing something, it's an expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like everything is. That's why we have like a bubbling sensation within ourselves where we aspire to express what it is that we're supposed to express, or what we feel like our calling. So this could echo in all layers of our lives, from the most mundane will to paint a picture or to sculpt a statue, to my aspiration to articulate myself. I'm trying to give a class over. I have a concept in my mind, and I have like a drive to try and express it. And if I manage to, like right now, if I manage to convey the idea that I'm trying to say, so there's pleasure in that. There's a feeling of purpose. So there's nothing more purposeful, more innate or intrinsic than this drive to express oneself. Now, in today's culture, it's become extremely prominent. And one of the most explicit places is this concept of freedom of speech, again, in its most broadest context. So not just that you shouldn't be censored by the communist government, but just like everyone should always say whatever it is they want to say, because we have this, again, this erupting intrinsic instinct to express ourselves, and it really strives from a very deep place within ourselves. So any assumption or any threat towards that, or any set of rules or any society that would try to balance or subjugate our expression of self is, in a sense, attacking a very profound part of who we are. So society has over the past years, especially the past generation, has cultivated and sanctified this intrinsic will. But there are two sides to it. This is what he's discussing in today's portion of Mashiach in regards to the Metzorah, like we said before. On the one hand, it's true that this is expressing something very deep and profound within every person's self. And on the other hand, because it's so deep for us, our intuitive, or even in a sense frantic or hysterical fear that anyone ever tell us to be quiet, or not just be quiet in my speech. We're using speech as a prototype for expression of self. So because it's so deep and profound within our personality, this will to express ourselves. So any suggestion where I should hold back from my expression of self immediately associates to like an attack on the deepest part of who I am. But what that causes is that we end up sanctifying any hiccup that comes up, like anything I have to say. Very often in classes I say this more, not like a Zoom class, but we give classes and courses and all sorts of places, that it used to be commonly accepted that you can give over a very long discourse, maybe even for a couple of years. Like if someone comes to your yeshiva, your school, then like it was like commonly accepted that if you just walked into the class, you don't ask questions. Maybe even you sit around for a couple of years if there are 40-year-old students here and they've been around for 15 years learning this topic, and you walked in, even if you walked in a year ago, So you bear with it for a while until you ask questions. So today, that just doesn't exist. Not only does it not exist, even suggesting such a notion where someone should hold back on his questions, or not just questions, that anyone should hold back on their intuitive, intrinsic instinct to express themselves is grasped as an attack, like a head-on attack on the holiest of holies, the freedom of speech. Now, what this causes, first of all, like we said in the beginning, this is understandable because a human being's intrinsic need and will to express himself is his most inherent trait. This is what we're defined by. Again, this is what we're titled as. As a species, we are a speaking species. So this is what we are. But on the other hand, the frantic, almost hysteric cultivation of any hiccup of expression, it causes everything to be very premature. If you don't allow a prolonged process of expression of self, then you're in a sense captivated in your most premature expressions. So that example I said before is a very good example. If you walk into a new topic, like someone's coming to this class for the first time, and maybe people have been bearing with us for a while, so all of the language is familiar, and the concepts and the ideas. So this is the first time a person's hearing it, and immediately he has questions. And he doesn't have the mental capacity to subdue that and give it time and bear with it. Again, not in order to not ask the questions, but in order to better them and allow them to ripen and become something that's worthy of picking. So he's actually compromising for his most superficial expression of self. That's what's happening today. That's how the Mea Shiloach describes what Lashon Hara is. It's actually a person compromising his intrinsic sense of self. This is a very interesting way of like contemplating on why the Torah has such a scrutinizing, even somewhat critical view of what you can and can't say or do. Like every expression of self is very, very carefully scrutinized. It's not scrutinized because we want to subjugate a person's expression of self, the opposite. It's all leaning on a dire belief that this is really what a human being's most deepest intrinsic sense of self is. And because it's so deep, because this is my will and my aspiration to express myself is tapping on such a very profound part of who I am, so it's like a severe sin to compromise for superficial expression of self, because it's going to captivate you. So if you insist on sanctifying that any hiccup you have, anything that comes up to your mind, the tip of your tongue you have to say, again, obviously there can be a lot of Lashon Hara coming for that, like simple things you shouldn't be saying, but more than that, what you're losing your ability to ripen within, to allow a true process to express your true self, in a sense. So all of the processes in Torah of the holding back on any expression of self, and again, our archetype is speech, so anything you should first be quiet. This is, in a sense, in the Baal Shem Tov's Torah, maybe the most profound and important Torah of the Baal Shem Tov is that when you're looking for a rabbi, this is the context that he discusses it in, when a person is looking for a teacher, a master. So the most important trait in a teacher is to find a teacher who is first silent before he speaks. So again, that could mean many, many layers. So first of all, probably you should find a teacher that learned a lot before he started expressing himself. So there was a period of silence, but on a more profound level, it's not just that there were a few years that he was accumulating knowledge before he expressed himself, but that there's a profound silence in the depth of his speech. And every word he says is leaning on a lot of silencing, or in other words, that he's silenced many layers of what he had to say before he voices something. So what you're hearing from him isn't the most superficial first premature statement that erupted outwards, but something that kind of cooked and matured within, and when it ripened, then he said, now in order for that to happen, then there has to be a certain amount or a certain level of subduing oneself, of holding back from my expression, not just expressing myself. So in a sense, a lot of today's freedom of speech, which is, again, not just speech, or in the arts or modern art, and all sorts of an array of mentality and psychology and education that is on the one hand tapped into something very holy, very true, very profound, that a human's ability to express himself is his true freedom. I'm going into Pesach now. So as the Arizal says, the word Pesach in Hebrew means a mouth speaking, Pesach, the ability to speak. And when the Arizal is describing what what the subjugation in Egypt was, what was our most dire, what made us slaves, our most dire enslavement. So more than the harsh labor that we were subjugated to, more than all of the even torture that we were under. Whoever's familiar with the historical accounts of what the Jews went through in Egypt, but more than all of that, the most profound point that the Arizal puts his finger on is that we didn't have an ability to express who we were. So other than being subjugated and working all day, but all of that together created a situation where our self, who we are, was silenced. So in a sense, we can say that element of exile we're still very much under. We're still not able to voice out the truth of who we are. We're constantly needing to take into consideration all sorts of irrelevant considerations, or just psychologically we lack the confidence to say our calling, to say who we are. But more than that, which is the most captivating point, is that we're so preoccupied. Again, in today's culture, more than a communist regime is standing over you and forbidding you to say your statement. More than that, there's a liberal regime that's standing over you and insisting that you immediately pick every premature fruit. And that's also captivating you, because I'm not capable of actually reaching the depth of what I wanted to say. I remain frustrated. I constantly remain feeling that I'm not managing to express myself because I'm constantly expressing myself. This is like the depth of what Lashon Hara means. So now you can also understand why the result of this is this disease of boils. And the boils of tzarat are like, again, it's like something boiling within you until it just erupts outwards and you can't hold it anymore. And the reason you're not managing to say it is because you're so captivated in sanctifying every premature notion that you never go through a deep, profound enough process to actually ripen and say who you really are. So you remain unexpressed. And again, like we said, there's nothing more difficult or more intrinsically pivoting up against our nature than being unexpressed, because we are a speaking species. That's what we are. But in order for that to manifest in a healthy manner, we have to silence ourselves on a paradoxical way. So first you have to be able to silence those premature notions for something deep to cook up within, so that you can then actually say it out to the world. And if you don't do that, and you keep sanctifying your superficial expression of self, so the depth of who we are remains subjugated within, and then kind of bubbles up, and you get these boils, these tzarat, that are like yourself wanting to let itself free. But you're so captivated in your mundane, day-to-day bad speech. So bad speech here isn't necessarily specific saying something bad like Lashon Hara, it's just superficial speech. And not willing to put myself in check and subdue my premature notions in order to allow a deep process to concoct with it. So this is also a very beautiful word for Parashat Metzorah, and also very relevant for Pesach. So this is also for next week on Sunday is already B'dikas Chametz. We probably won't have a class, but this is a very good word for what Pesach is, a holiday that we're supposed to all be set free. So everyone can contemplate that the true freedom of who you are, every person here, is that you manage to express your uniqueness, your specific expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Every Jew, every person in the world, every creation in the world, and all the more so every person, obviously, is a unique expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in order for that to manifest, every one of us is going to have to not be prone to pick every premature fruit. You have to allow your true self to ripen. And for that to happen, we have to be willing to also subjugate the premature notions that are erupting from us. And then the process can ripen from within, and we're able to present a true manifestation of who we are. And that will soothe that dire need to express oneself, which is what makes us human. So we should all be set free in this Pesach. All our mouths should be open so that we can voice who we really are. Chag Sameach.